I knew something was wrong the second the glass touched my lips. Not the kind of wrong you shrug off at a family party, the kind that makes your tongue go quiet and your heartbeat count to 5 before the rest of you catches up. It was my 70th birthday, the room full of laughter and garlic and old Sinatra. My daughter Sarah pressed a stemmed glass into my hand and said, "Happy birthday, Dad," to many more. I smiled because that is what fathers do, but the wine did not smile back. We were in Little Italy on Mayfield Road in Cleveland, the same block where I took her for cannoli when she was 8 and lost her first tooth in a napkin. The restaurant still had the mural of the Amalfi Coast, still served meatballs the size of a baseball. It was late January. The front windows were fogged from people and steam. The snow outside lay in a clean 6-inch blanket on the curb. My son Michael argued about the Browns with his cousins. Cousin Tony tried to get the server to add extra Parmesan. All the noise felt like a coat I used to love, but did not fit the same anymore. I loved wine once. I kept 200 bottles in a basement rack I built after Martha died. It gave me something to do at night besides talk to a quiet house. I learned vintages by memory the way other men learn batting stats. I am not a sommelier, just an old mechanical engineer with a careful nose. Oak sits one way on the tongue. Fruit sits another. Cheap sugar tries to pretend it is fruit. Real fruit does not try. This glass pretended. And there was something else, a thin, chalky note under the berry. I would not have noticed if Sarah had not been watching me so closely, her eyes on my mouth like she was waiting to see a number on a scoreboard. Sarah used to grip my hand crossing crosswalks on Euclid Avenue, like a bird afraid of traffic. These days she talks fast about practical things. "How are you feeling? Do you need help with your bills? Who is your lawyer again?" She says it kindly, but always with a little stopwatch behind her teeth. 2 weeks ago she called about my will, not the sentimental part where I leave Martha's mixing bowl to whoever still bakes. The dry part, titles, beneficiaries, power of attorney. I told her I would think. She said, "Of course, Dad, you know I only want you safe." I believed her because that is what fathers do. But tonight she did not drink from my bottle. That detail settled in the back of my mind, the way snow settles on a railing. The server poured my glass from a small, unlabeled decanter. Her glass came from a fresh bottle with a neat Napa label and a silver foil neck. She raised it, clinked mine, and only wet her lips. Someone yelled speech, and she stood, cameras up, ready to record. She knows stories and visuals. She works in marketing now. You pay attention to the moment, she says. Make the moment work for you. I took another small sip and let it sit. There was a soft sweetness that did not belong in a dry red. It felt like the wine was trying to go to sleep, right there on my tongue. My hands have done plenty of work. 40 years at the plant. Late shifts for overtime when tuition was due. My knuckles still carry old burns from a line that snapped in 1993. I paid off the house one stubborn month at a time. When the mortgage company sent the final letter, I taped it to the fridge with blue painter's tape. Sarah took a picture with me in that piece of paper. We both cried. I did not expect to wonder years later if that same daughter would hand me a glass. That asked me to trust her. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe the kitchen mixed up decanters. Maybe the cheap stuff tasted strange. I looked across the table. Michael's glass came from the open bottle. Michael takes big gulps and laughs with his whole chest. He did not notice anything. The server hovered, friendly, quick to ask if I wanted more. Sarah lifted her phone, framing me, that careful smile on her face. A few guests started a chorus of "Happy Birthday," a little off-key, the way it always is in American restaurants, when strangers decide to be relatives, for 30 seconds. I set the glass down and felt the room tilt by a degree. Not a real tilt, more like the feeling you get on a bridge when a truck rumbles past. My stomach did a small turn. I breathed. I thought about Martha's voice telling me to stop being dramatic and eat something. I cut into the chicken piccata and chewed slowly. The taste was fine. The wine sat there, mute and patient. Sarah slipped her phone into her purse. She touched my shoulder and said softly that she had a little surprise after the cake. She squeezed my shoulder once, the way people do when they think they are comforting someone who has no idea what is coming. I watched her reach for her own glass and pass it to Michael with a joke about him needing to slow down. She did not pour herself another. A father knows his children's tells. Sarah's is the way she keeps her jaw still when she wants to smile. She did it now. The server set a second small pour by my plate without asking. I smelled it, and the same thin chalk hovered under the fruit, like a shadow under snow. I lifted the glass to my lips, then stopped midair. I looked at my daughter. She looked back, her eyes bright, almost wet. The room kept singing. The candles waited. My hand did not shake. I placed the glass down, untouched, and cleared my throat. "Sarah," I said quietly, "would you trade with me for a second? I want you to try mine." I didn't think she'd hesitate. But the second I asked Sarah to trade glasses, her hand froze on the tablecloth like I'd just spoken a foreign language. She laughed too quickly, too loud, drawing the attention of half the room. "Oh, Dad, you and your wine tests. You've always been the picky one." Her voice wobbled just enough for me to hear, "It wasn't a joke." That laugh ripped me backward through time. I remembered the day she begged me to co-sign a loan for her new house in Columbus. She had smiled then too, nervously, promising it was just a formality, that she and her husband had everything under control. But 3 months later, I was the one fielding calls from the bank, hearing the word foreclosure tossed like a grenade. I paid 25 grand from my retirement account to stop the bleeding. That was 5 years ago. I told myself it was just a mistake. That family was worth sacrifice. Now I was staring at the same smile, the same calculation. I slid the glass a few inches closer. "One sip, Sarah." "Just humor your old man." Her eyes darted to Michael. He was still laughing, oblivious, chewing calamari. The cousins were singing off key. The cake with 70 candles was being carried out from the kitchen. Everyone else saw balloons and family. I saw a daughter cornered. She picked up the glass, raised it like a toast, and then, just as the candle flames lit up her face, she accidentally spilled half the wine across the white linen. Gasps, laughter, servers rushing in with napkins. Her cheeks flushed. "Clumsy me?" she muttered. But her hands didn't shake. She meant for that glass to fall. My suspicion hardened into certainty. When the commotion died down, she leaned in close to me. Her breath smelled of peppermint, not wine. She whispered, "Dad, don't ruin this night." Please a plea, not a warning. But to me it sounded like guilt, wearing a veil of tenderness. The cake came. Everyone cheered as I blew out the candles. I made a wish, though it wasn't the kind you say out loud. I wished for clarity, for truth, even if it cut me open. After dessert, Sarah stood again. She tapped her glass with a fork, her voice trembling as she announced a special gift for me. 2 waiters wheeled out a large envelope inside a gift bag, decorated with gold tissue paper. She handed it to me with both hands, eyes shining. "This is for you, Dad." From all of us, I opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of papers. At first, it looked like a framed certificate. But as my eyes adjusted, my blood ran cold. It was a legal document, power of attorney, already filled out, with my name printed neatly at the top. All it lacked was my signature. The room clapped politely, not understanding what they were seeing. Sarah laughed through her tears. "It's just to help you with the boring stuff, Dad. Bills, doctors, banks. You deserve to relax." That was the second twist of the night. She hadn't planned just a glass of wine. She had planned the handover of my entire life. I looked at Michael. He had no idea, nodding along like this was some generous gesture. The cousins toasted again, only I could see the trapdoor opening beneath my feet. I remembered the phone call 2 weeks earlier, Sarah asking if I had updated my will. She told me she was just curious about my life insurance policy. I brushed it off then. Now it all made sense. I set the document down on the cake-stained table. My voice was steady when I said, That's a thoughtful gift, sweetheart, but I don't think I'll be signing anything tonight. The air went stiff. Sarah's smile faltered. She leaned in, whispering through her teeth, "You don't know what you're doing. You could end up hurting all of us." That was the third twist, the mask dropping completely. She wasn't trying to care for me. She was trying to control me before I could control her. I folded the document carefully and slid it back into the envelope. Then I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Maybe it's time I show you exactly what I've been doing these past few weeks." Her brow furrowed, panic flickered across her face. Because what she didn't know was that I had already met with my attorney in downtown Cleveland 3 days ago. I had already changed the locks on the Lake Erie house, and I had already rewritten the will in a way that would turn her world upside down. But I wasn't about to reveal everything there. Not in front of family, not with the wine glass still glistening between us like a silent witness. I stood up, cleared my throat, and said, "Excuse me, everyone. I need a moment of fresh air." The restaurant buzzed back into chatter, assuming the old man was just overwhelmed by emotion. I slipped the envelope into my coat pocket and walked into the crisp Ohio night. The snow crunched under my boots. My breath hung in the air. My phone vibrated in my pocket, an unknown number. I answered, and a calm voice on the other end said, "Mr. Thomas, we've confirmed what you asked us to check. You were right. The substance in the wine is on record. Do you want us to proceed with the report?" I looked back through the frosted window at my daughter, laughing nervously with the guests, believing for one more minute that she still held the upper hand. I whispered into the phone, "Yes. Proceed." And that's when I knew. The real party hadn't even started yet. When Sarah spilled that wine and slid the power of attorney across the table, I thought the worst was over. I thought I had seen the core of her betrayal, and that I could walk away with my head high, cut her out of my will, and heal in silence. But I was wrong. The true heartbreak wasn't that my daughter tried to control me. It was realizing how many layers of her life had been built on lies I'd ignored for years. I left the restaurant that night with the document burning in my coat pocket and the cold January wind on my face. Cleveland winters have a way of stripping you bare. The snow on Mayfield Road was brown at the edges, cars humming by with salt dust on their tires. I sat in my old Ford, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at my reflection in the windshield. My face looked older than 70. It looked like a man who had missed signs again and again because love told him not to see. 2 days later, I decided to go through the old filing cabinet in my basement. I kept every receipt, every loan document, every tuition bill. Martha used to tease me, said I treated paper like it had feelings. But this time, it saved me. Buried in a folder marked Sarah House, I found something I'd never noticed. A copy of the co-sign loan papers from 5 years ago. My signature was clean. Hers was a scrawl. And attached, stapled to the back, was a second form I never signed. A home equity line of credit for $80,000, drawn against my house on Lake Erie. My stomach dropped. That explained why Sarah had been so insistent about the Lake Erie property these past months. She wasn't just eyeing my retirement, she had already dipped into it. Quietly, without telling me. I drove out to the lake house the next morning. The sky was flat gray, the kind that makes the water and horizon melt into one sheet of iron. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw a strange SUV parked by the garage. My hands shook as I walked inside. The place smelled of perfume and takeout containers. And then I heard voices, Sarah's, along with a man I didn't know. They were talking about renovations, about selling the place before the summer market opened. My heart pounded against my ribs. This was my house, the one Martha and I painted together, the one where we taught the kids to fish off the dock. I stepped into the doorway, and they froze. "Dad," Sarah said, face pale, "I was going to tell you." The man beside her shifted uncomfortably, some realtor in a slick coat. He held a folder of property photos, and then I saw the sign leaning against the wall. For sale, $395,000. pending owner consent. That was the second betrayal. Not just trying to drug me, not just pushing legal papers in my face. She had already set the stage to erase the last piece of my marriage, my memories, my sacrifices. I told the realtor to leave, my voice shaking with rage. He didn't argue. Sarah tried to explain, said she was only trying to liquidate assets, so I wouldn't be burdened with upkeep. She spun her words like silk, but the truth was steel underneath. I drove her back to Cleveland in silence. She cried, begged me to understand. She said she only wanted stability for the family, that I was too stubborn to manage things alone. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe my daughter wasn't the kind of person who would sell the floor from under my feet. But the signed documents in my basement said otherwise. That night, I called my lawyer. I told him everything. He listened quietly, then asked if I was ready to take the next step. My throat tightened. I thought about Martha, about all the times I stayed late at the plant, worked double shifts, scraped my knuckles raw so Sarah could have a life better than mine. Yes, I said finally, I'm ready. We met the next morning downtown. Snow fell heavy, turning the city into a white blur. I handed him the loan papers, the fake signature, the real estate contract. He looked me in the eye and said, Mr. Thomas, this is fraud, and you have more leverage than you realize. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like clarity. Maybe heartbreak could turn into something else, something sharper, something that could protect me. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, pen in hand, staring at the blank page of my new will. My chest hurt, not from age, but from the knowledge that I was about to cut my own daughter out of my life. Yet every time I hesitated, I pictured that for sale sign in my lake house, leaning against the wall like a gravestone. I signed. And then, as if fate wanted to twist the knife deeper, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Thomas, this is regarding the Lake Erie property. We need your confirmation on the transfer scheduled for Friday. Transfer? Friday? My blood ran cold. So Sarah wasn't done yet. She had set something in motion beyond my control. And I realized, if I didn't act fast, by the end of the week, my house, and maybe everything else, would be gone. I stood there in that restaurant, the taste of cheap sweetness still clinging to my lips, and raised my glass toward Sarah. Why don't you share this one with me, sweetheart? I said loud enough for the table to hear. For a heartbeat, she froze. Then she laughed, light and airy, but the sound cracked at the edges. Everyone thought it was nothing, a father teasing his daughter. But I watched her hand tremble ever so slightly as she reached for the glass. She stalled, asked if maybe I wanted champagne instead, and that's when I knew she was cornered. The room buzzed back into chatter, forks clinking on plates, someone shouting for dessert. But my eyes never left hers. She touched the rim of the glass to her lips, but didn't drink. She set it down, smiled that same frozen smile, and leaned in. Dad, please, let's not make a scene. It hit me then. She wasn't just trying to humiliate me. She was testing how much control she had left. 2 nights before, I'd caught her in my study, rifling through the lock cabinet. She said she was looking for insurance paperwork. I told myself it was innocent. But now, standing here with a doctored glass of wine between us, I understood. That cabinet wasn't about insurance. It was about ownership. I pushed my chair back slowly and stood. The candles flickered as the cake was carried out, 70 flames lighting my daughter's face. I clapped along with everyone else, even smiled for the photos. But inside, my chest felt like steel. Because while they sang, my phone buzzed in my pocket with the text I'd been waiting for. Lab results ready. Call ASAP. After the cake, when the room loosened with sugar and laughter, I excused myself. Outside, the snow on the sidewalk crunched under my boots. I dialed the doctor, my breath a white cloud in the Cleveland night. His voice was low, certain. Mr. Thomas, the sample you dropped off, it contained benzodiazepines, strong enough to put you down for hours. In your condition, it could have been worse. The air stung my lungs. For a moment I thought of Martha, her laugh in this very neighborhood. How proud she'd been when I got sober 15 years ago. If she were alive, she'd be looking at me with that mix of fury and grief only she could pull off. I slipped the phone back in my pocket, the city noise muffled by snow. Through the restaurant window, I saw Sarah laughing with Michael, pretending nothing had happened. My hands clenched into fists. When I returned, I didn't sit. I tapped my glass with a fork. The room fell silent. I looked straight at Sarah and said, "My daughter gave me something tonight that I'll never forget." I paused. Her face went pale. Everyone leaned in, expecting sentiment. I smiled. A reminder that trust is worth more than money. And I sat down again. The table erupted in applause, thinking I'd been profound. Only Sarah knew what I meant. Later, as guests bundled into coats, she cornered me near the coat rack. Her eyes were wet but sharp. "Why are you doing this?" she hissed. "You're going to ruin everything." I looked at her the way I used to look at broken machines at the plant, calculating, cold. "No, Sarah." "You already did." She opened her mouth, then closed it. She grabbed her husband's arm and stormed out into the snow. When the night finally ended and I was home, I went straight to the study. The cabinet lock was scratched. Inside, the deed to the Lake Erie house was missing. My stomach dropped. That was the twist I hadn't seen coming. The wine wasn't the whole play. It was just the smoke before the fire. On my desk sat a crumpled sticky note in her handwriting. "Meeting Friday. Don't be late. No details, no address." Just that. I sank into the chair, my heart pounding. My daughter hadn't just tried to drug me. She had already taken steps to move property out from under me, and Friday was the deadline. I stared at that note. The ink smudged from her thumb. And I realized if I didn't act before Friday, I wouldn't just lose my house. I'd lose every piece of my life she hadn't already stolen. That's when the anger hardened into something else. Not just survival. Revenge. And as the clock ticked past midnight, I whispered to the empty room, "Friday, then. Let's see who shows up." The police took the glass from the restaurant that night, bagged it, and promised me they'd test it. For a week, the silence was heavier than any snowstorm Cleveland had seen. I went about my routine, coffee at the corner diner, morning walks past the frozen lake, but every sound of the phone made me jump. I thought maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe the lab would come back empty, and I'd be left with nothing but shame for doubting my own child. But then the detective called. "Mr. Thomas, the results are in. Your daughter didn't just give you wine. She gave you a sedative strong enough to incapacitate you." My hand gripped the receiver until my knuckles went white. He explained how, in Ohio law, it qualified as attempted poisoning, a felony. He asked if I wanted to press charges. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I thought of Sarah at 5 years old, running through the yard with Martha's scarf tied around her shoulders like a cape. I thought of her college graduation when I sold my old Buick just to cover her last semester's tuition. And then I thought of her face across the restaurant table, watching me hold that glass, her smile pulled so tight it almost split. "Yes," I said finally, "do what you need to do." 2 weeks later, the fallout began. Sarah's husband packed up and left once he realized the police had evidence. The company she worked for put her on unpaid leave when her mugshot hit the local paper. But the worst wasn't the job or the marriage. It was the day she walked into court, head bowed, and faced me from across the aisle. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The prosecutor laid everything bare. The tampered wine, the forged paperwork for the Lake Erie house, the loan taken behind my back. Piece by piece, the picture was painted. Family members gasped in the gallery. Michael sat with his head in his hands, refusing to believe his sister could sink that low. My lawyer leaned in and whispered, "You understand, this means you'll lose her completely." I whispered back, "I already did." The twist came when Sarah tried to shift the blame, claiming I'd grown paranoid and confused, that I'd mixed up my memories, that she was only protecting me. But the lab results shut her mouth, and then the final nail. The realtor she had worked with testified, admitting she'd planned to sell the Lake Erie house under my nose, with forged consent, by Friday of that week. The judge didn't need much more. Sarah was sentenced to probation and community service, but the conviction carried the weight of truth. She lost her job, her reputation, and most of all, the mask she had worn for years. As for me, I didn't feel joy when the gavel struck. What I felt was release. The kind of release that comes when you set down a load you've carried for too many winters. That night, I drove out to the lake house alone. The water was still frozen, moonlight glinting off its surface like broken glass. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and for the first time in months, the air didn't feel stolen. It was mine again. I poured myself a coffee, not wine, and sat in Martha's old rocking chair. I realized revenge wasn't about getting even. It was about drawing a line in the snow and saying, "This far, no further." The lesson I took was simple but sharp. Love can blind you, even to the people closest to you. And if you don't protect what's yours, your dignity, your voice, your truth, someone else will take it without hesitation. Have you ever had someone you loved betray your trust so deeply you didn't know where to turn? If you have, I'd like to hear your story in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, about heartbreak, about justice, about finding the strength to stand back up, stick around. This isn't just my story anymore. It belongs to anyone who's ever had to fight for themselves when family turned away.